The camera opens on a horizon split in two, half sky, half motion. A black locomotive crawls across the prairie like a living thing, its breath a column of steam that drifts against a white Kansas sky. The year is 1873, and the Great Plains are no longer quiet. The earth shakes as the train drives forward, steel wheels striking rhythm into the soil. Every mile laid is a declaration. This is progress. The men beside the tracks, engineers in dark coats, investors with cigars, smile like conquerors. They call it the Iron Road, and they believe it will civilize everything it touches. But on the far side of the field, the old world still lingers. A handful of cowboys, lean and sun-scarred, sit their horses watching the smoke rise. Their range once stretched beyond sight, grasslands that fed herds too vast to count. The whistle cuts through the wind, and one of them mutters, "That sound will scare the cattle clear to Texas." He's not wrong. The railroad men see endless opportunity. The cattlemen see the end of open sky. Two kinds of America, facing each other across a fence that hasn't yet been built. From Dodge City to Abilene, the towns grow around depots, their wooden signs promising new beginnings and fair land for fair men. Each spike driven into the ground feels like a nail in the coffin of the old frontier. The Cowboys' herds once moved north unhindered. The Chisholm Trail, the Goodnight Loving Trail, carved by hooves and sweat. But the train changes the rhythm of life. Cattle can now be shipped by rail, slaughtered by machine, sold by schedule. The romance of the drive becomes a business ledger. The smell of sage and leather gives way to the smoke of coal. The railroad kings, men like Jay Gould, Collis P. Huntington, and Edward Harriman, never set foot in these grasslands. They didn't have to. Their empires were drawn in ink and steel. They owned the routes, the towns, the time itself. "We built the nation," they claimed, and in a way they did. But every empire leaves a shadow. The cowhands become drifters. The small ranches, pressed between land grants and rail rights, begin to vanish. The companies pay bonuses for settlement, free land along the line. Posters show golden wheat under blue skies, a farmer tipping his hat to the engine. Few mention the wind. Few remember that this land was meant to be grass. In Nebraska, a man named Thomas Calloway plows 20 acres he bought from the railroad for $1 an acre. His father rode for the XIT ranch, a man of saddle leather and silence. Thomas trades the bridle for a plowshare. "It's the new way," he says, "and I'll not be left behind." He isn't alone. By 1900, more than 5 million settlers live where bison once grazed. The train whistles across the plains each morning, delivering seed, tools, and the dream of mastery. The air smells of turned soil and burning coal. But there are cracks in the dream, even then. Old ranchers talk about the grass that once ran thigh-high, roots deep as a man's arm, holding the world together. The new wheat doesn't last through dry spells. The rain, they notice, doesn't follow the train after all. A government surveyor in 1911 writes, "The land gives easy the first years. Afterward it resists. The dust is light and the wind persistent. No one listens, not yet." By the turn of the century, the railroads dominate every horizon. From Chicago to Santa Fe, from Denver to Amarillo, the continent is laced with more than 200,000 miles of track. The men who built it have names carved in granite and brass. Their portraits hang in city halls and banks. To them, the cowboys were relics, quaint, unprofitable, and expendable. But the old riders, even in their fading days, sense a warning. They say the prairie doesn't forget being torn. And when the wind shifts, it carries more than dust, it carries memory. The trains keep moving, faster each year. The earth stays still, listening. In the next part, the kings of iron will build their fortunes mile by mile, but their empire, like the prairie beneath it, is built on ground that will not hold. The year is 1885, and America hums with the sound of ambition. The continent, once a wild expanse of rivers and wind, now ticks to the rhythm of the railroad schedule. Time itself has been standardized into zones so the trains won't collide. That's how powerful these men have become. In the parlors of New York and San Francisco, the railroad kings sit in leather chairs, cigar smoke rising through lamplight. Men like Jay Gould, Leland Stanford, Collis P. Huntington, and E.H. Harriman, their names carved on banks, courthouses, and schools. To the country, they are symbols of progress. To those who know better, they are emperors of steel. They do not build with their hands, they build with contracts, bonds, and debt. Their trains move armies, crops, cattle, and men. But behind each rail lies another kind of track, the legal one, the one that decides who owns the land and who merely works it. The Union Pacific cuts through the plains like a promise. The Santa Fe follows, binding the Southwest to the east. By 1890, the two meet in a frenzy of competition. Gould buys politicians, Stanford builds colleges to cleanse his name, Huntington bribes Congress for more land grants. Together they carve a kingdom out of federal territory, 1 mile at a time. Each mile of track earns them 16,000 acres of public land. Each spike driven into the ground is another man's farm. The settlers who follow believe they're chasing freedom, but the truth is simpler. They're filling a map for the magnates. Railroads print glossy brochures. The great American desert is now a garden. They ship lumber, seeds, and plows westward by the ton. And as the trains unload, the prairie begins to change color, from buffalo grass to wheat, from silence to commerce. The kings travel in private rail cars trimmed with velvet and brass. They dine on china while the workers eat from tin pails beside the track. 1,000 miles away, the men who swing the hammers sleep in tents, paid in company scrip. When a drought hits Kansas in 1894, the railroads keep their prices high. Farmers beg to ship their grain at a loss. The companies refuse. The market decides, the agents say. But it's not the market, it's monopoly. The Grange movement rises in protest, the first rumblings of rebellion from the soil itself. Farmers meet by lantern light, planning co-ops and boycotts. But the kings are patient. They know revolts burn fast and fade. What matters is the ledger. By the dawn of the new century, the iron web stretches across the continent. Every town depends on the railroad's mercy. They decide who thrives and who starves. A single delay in shipment can ruin a season. One Kansas wheat grower wrote in his ledger, "They own the rails, we own the dust." He wasn't wrong. The land itself begins to feel the weight of all this ambition. Tens of millions of acres once held firm by grassroots are now carved bare for profit. Trains haul wheat out of the plains by the ton, 50 carloads a day from Dodge City alone. The kings measure success in yield, not in years. No one thinks about what happens when the soil runs out. No one imagines that the same iron rails carrying fortune east will one day carry families west in flight. In their mansions, the railroad magnates speak of destiny. Stanford declares, "We are the modern Romans." Gould laughs and replies, "Then let us pray the barbarians never find us." They toast to the future, unaware that it will come on the wind. Outside, the trains thunder through the night, sparks trailing from their stacks like falling stars. The plains are restless beneath them, whispering through the grass they've left untouched. For now, the empire shines. But every empire that rises on pride writes its own epitaph, in the same breath. Soon, the iron road will reach its limits. The cowboys are gone, the settlers are in place, and the kings believe they've mastered the land. But mastery has a cost, and the land is keeping the bill. The year is 1901, and the West is no longer wild. The camera opens on a barbed wire fence stretching across the horizon mile after mile, cutting through what was once open range. Beyond it, the land lies tamed, square fields, straight roads, telegraph poles pacing into infinity. The great herds are gone. The cowboys who once slept under open sky now ride fence lines for wages, their songs drowned by the hiss of passing trains. In towns like Abilene, Dodge City, and Lamar, the saloons still stand, but the laughter is different. The cattle drives have ended. The stockyards ship by rail now, schedules printed on calendars where trails once wandered by instinct. The frontier spirit, the reckless, dust-streaked freedom of the saddle, has been traded for timetables and contracts. Progress has a face, and it's tired. The railroads, once symbols of adventure, now serve routine. They've turned the West into an extension of the East, a vast machine of supply. Where grass once fed bison, wheat now feeds the world. And the barons, seated in faraway offices, boast of conquest through cultivation. The soil gives easily at first. The grassroots, thick and centuries deep, hide a dangerous secret. They're the only thing holding the land together. When the settlers tear them out, the ground loses its memory. Still, the ads keep coming. Posters promise, plow the plains, rain will follow the train. Men believe it because they need to. On a cold March morning in 1910, a young farmer named Ernest Blake stands at the edge of his claim in the Oklahoma Panhandle. His father rode for the Miller Brothers 101 ranch, but Ernest has traded the rope for the plow. Behind him stands a steam tractor, coughing black smoke, pulling a 12-blade disc. He drives it straight into virgin sod that's never felt steel before. The blades bite, and the prairie rolls up like carpet. Beneath the hum of machinery, you can almost hear the soil gasp. He pauses only once, looks back toward the west, where a single windmill turns slow against the horizon. His wife waves from the porch of a half-built house. He wipes his brow and shouts over the noise, "We're making a future here." He's right, he just doesn't know how long it'll last. By 1917, The Great War demands wheat, mountains of it. Grow more for victory, the posters cry. The railroads ship millions of bushels eastward, and the farmers push harder, plowing every inch of ground they can reach. Land that was meant for grass becomes endless rows of wheat. Prices soar, new machines, combines, tractors, harrows, replace horses and men. The earth trembles under iron and greed. Cowboys vanish from the story entirely. Their open trails become fenced memories. What was once freedom becomes property. The old men of the range sit in small-town cafes, watching freight trains roll past, their reflections flickering in the glass. One of them, a rider from the Matador Ranch, mutters, "They said the West was won. Feels to me like it just gave up." The railroad magnates don't see tragedy, they see yield. They measure success by carloads, not consequences. Their surveys report record harvests, rising settlements, profitable soil. Yet the warnings are there. A government field agent in 1925 writes, "Soil drifting evident, ground loosening after wheat. Recommend rotation." His report is filed away and forgotten. Farmers keep plowing. Towns keep growing. The prairie keeps losing its grip. In the East, the kings of rail throw banquets to celebrate the closing of the frontier. Newspapers print speeches about how America has conquered its wilderness. But out on the plains, the wind begins to whisper differently. The grass no longer hums. The ground feels lighter underfoot, as if hollow. The frontier didn't die in gunfire or glory. It died in silence, the slow, invisible collapse of balance between man and land. The cowboys vanished, the barons grew fat, and the soil waited, patient. Because nature keeps score. As the 1920s bloom with jazz and optimism, the plains look golden, seas of wheat under wide blue skies. It seems the railroads have won. The iron road brought civilization, the plow brought wealth, and the wilderness is finally subdued. But the truth sits just below the surface. The roots that once anchored the world are gone. The wind is learning to move differently now, searching for what's loose, for what will rise when it blows. The same wind that once carried songs from a cowboy's campfire now carries something else, a warning. The land will speak soon, in dust, not words. And when it does, the kings of iron will hear it echo through their empty rails. The year is 1919, and the war is over. But the hunger isn't. Europe lies in ruin, and America becomes the breadbasket of the world. The railroads, humming again with wartime energy, promise farmers a fortune, feed the world and the world will pay you back. The plains answer. Wheat replaces grass, money replaces caution, and ambition replaces sense. Trains whistle through western Kansas, Oklahoma, and the Texas Panhandle, their cars loaded with new settlers and new machines. Steam tractors gleam on flatbeds. Companies sell seed, fertilizer, and dreams. Every ad is a hymn to progress. Turn the prairie to profit. No land more fertile under God's sun. And so they do. In the small town of Dalhart, Texas, the Blake family has doubled their acreage. Ernest's son Will now runs the plow, a Fordson with wide steel wheels and teeth that cut deeper than any horse could pull. The engine rattles the ground, coughing dust into the wind. Behind it, a wake of freshly turned soil rolls like a dark tide. His father watches from the porch, pipe in hand. "We used to ride for cattle," he says quietly, almost to himself. "Now we ride for the plow." Across the plains, thousands of men like Will work from dawn till dark, measuring worth by acres broken and bushels sold. The railroads reward their effort with cheap shipping, grain elevators, and warehouses that rise like cathedrals of commerce. Every harvest, the trains pull out of the stations groaning with grain, a line of iron arteries feeding a hungry world. In 1926, Kansas alone ships 250 million bushels of wheat. The papers call it the miracle of the plains. No one asks what miracles cost. The grass that once covered the plains wasn't just decoration, it was armor. Roots ran 5 feet deep, binding the soil to the earth like the stitching of a great leather hide. It held water, it held memory, it held the wind in check. But in a single generation, man has torn that armor away. When the plow tears the last of the native sod, the land is naked for the first time in 10,000 years. The wind takes note. Scientists warn that the rainfall is a cycle, not a promise. The phrase "rain follows the plow," coined by railroad promoters decades earlier, was never true, only convenient. But the myth has grown stronger than fact, because it flatters men to believe they've mastered nature. In Washington, D.C., agriculture experts issue polite bulletins about overproduction and soil depletion. The farmers don't read them. They're too busy watching the price of wheat climb to $2.116 a bushel, a fortune compared to the lean years before the war. The bankers encourage more expansion. The railroads do too. For every new acre plowed, another ton of freight to ship, another carload of grain. The kings of steel may no longer rule from their velvet cars, but their empire endures in freight receipts. And the plow keeps turning. By 1928, the Great Plains shimmer with a strange kind of prosperity. Towns host wheat festivals. Dealers sell tractors on credit. Every barn radio buzzes with confidence. Jazz from Chicago, stock prices from New York, promises of a golden decade ahead. But in the evenings, when the wind dies, the fields don't settle. A fine haze lingers, thin, gray, almost invisible, the first sigh of soil lifting from the ground. Children track it into houses. Women sweep it from windowsills and think little of it. They should have thought more. That same year, an agricultural agent named Hugh Bennett drives across the Oklahoma Panhandle and writes in his notes, "This is over-farming of the highest order. Grassland turned to desert in waiting." He sends his report east. It sits unread in a stack of paperwork for 4 years. The market drives harder. The farmers push deeper. By 1929, wheat covers 100 million acres of land once clothed in grass. The trains can't move it fast enough. The plains look endless and golden, a sea of profit. And then, the stock market falls. When the crash of '29 hits, wheat prices collapse overnight, from $2.16 to 38 cents. The banks call in their loans. Families, desperate to recover losses, plow even more ground, praying for a bumper harvest to save them. The prairie is carved down to dust. And then comes the drought. In 1931, the rains stop, wells dry up, wheat shrivels in the field. The soil, stripped of grass, begins to drift. The first small dust storms rise, at first only a few yards high, like dark ghosts wandering the fields. Children chase them, laughing. The parents don't. The wind finds its rhythm again. In the distance, trains still roll, empty now, or half-loaded with grain that no one can afford. The great iron arteries begin to pulse slower. The engines that once sang of progress now echo through silence. The land has stopped giving. And all across the plains, the people look skyward for clouds that never come. The camera opens on the plains in 1930, a horizon of shimmering heat and soundless promise. The land looks rich, almost eternal, rolling gold beneath an ocean of blue. But beneath that brightness, something vital is missing. The roots are gone, the soil is loose, the prairie's skin has been stripped bare. Farmers call this moment the good years. Historians will later call it the Great Plow-Up. From northern Texas to western Kansas, tractors move like armies across the land, steel against silence. Men drive hour after hour, dust streaking their faces, the exhaust coughing black against the wind. A few remember when their fathers plowed by horse. Now the machines can turn 100 acres before sundown. They are racing not against time but against debt. The banks have called in their loans after the crash of '29, and the only way to pay them is to plant more wheat, to bet everything on one more harvest. The railroads, desperate to keep freight running, encourage it. They print new pamphlets with a different tone. Production means recovery. By 1931, more than 32 million acres of prairie grass have been plowed under an area larger than all of Pennsylvania. The old ranchers watching from their fences shake their heads. One of them mutters to a neighbor, "They're mining the soil now, not farming it." He's right. A tractor crawls across a field near Guymon, Oklahoma, dragging a 12-disc plow through ground that hasn't seen rain in months. The driver, a young man named Roy Ellison, wipes his forehead and watches the dust rise behind him like smoke. He thinks about his father's advice. Leave the land some rest, but rest doesn't pay the bank. That night when the sun drops and the wind cools, Roy notices something strange. The soil, once soft and dark, now lies cracked and powdery, like ash. When he steps on it, it shifts, not crunching, but sliding, whispering. He looks up at the stars and wonders how something so strong could come apart so fast. In 1932, the first real dust storm hits Boise City, Oklahoma. The sky goes brown by noon, and by evening the sun disappears completely. Chickens roost early, lamps burn at midday, the air smells of iron and decay. People cover their mouths with wet rags. The next morning, trains on the Santa Fe line sit stalled under drifts of earth 3 feet high. Railroad workers shovel the tracks like snow. But the soil just keeps coming, fine as flour, slipping through fingers, invading everything. The papers call it a freak storm. The farmers call it bad luck. The land calls it justice. By 1933, the Great Plow-Up has become the Great Collapse. The soil, stripped of structure, begins to travel mile after mile, town after town. It rides the wind eastward, darkening the sky across Colorado, Texas, and Kansas. Entire counties vanish in haze. The government sends photographers. One of them, a young man named Arthur Rothstein, captures a farmer and his two sons walking against a storm, their faces wrapped in cloth, their bodies bent forward like ghosts moving through smoke. The image becomes an emblem, not just of drought, but of arrogance punished. In Washington, the railroad barons remain insulated in marble offices. They issue statements about temporary hardships, but even their trains now run half empty. The same wind that buried the farmers' homes now buries their rails. By the spring of 1934, more than 100 million acres of farmland lie ruined. The soil moves like a living thing, a black tide. It creeps into towns, fills wells, kills livestock, blinds men. Children wake at night coughing up dirt. Families seal windows with newspaper, stuff rags under doors, and pray the wind will change direction. The dust drifts are so deep that fences vanish, roads disappear. The land looks like a dead sea. One evening, as the storm approaches Dalhart, Will Blake steps onto his porch. The sky is a copper bruise, the light gone strange and thick. He listens. There's no thunder, no rain, just a low hum like a train far away. But it's not a train, it's the earth itself coming apart. He closes the door, nails a blanket over the window, and tells his family it's another black one. Outside, day turns to midnight in seconds. Across the plains, freight engines crawl through the dark with their headlights swallowed by dust. Conductors lean out the windows, coughing through wet rags. The engines choke as sand grinds through pistons. Rails vanish under shifting dunes. The trains, the proud machines of empire, now sound like dying animals. The Union Pacific reports that entire lines are temporarily lost. The Santa Fe lists more than 12,000 miles of track affected by dust. The same steel that once tamed the land now lies buried under it. And yet, even as the storms rage, some farmers keep plowing. Habit, hope, desperation. One Kansas man, near Garden City, writes in his diary, "The dust rolls so thick I can't see the barn. My wife says it's the end of days. I tell her it's just weather, but I don't believe myself." He seals the entry with a fingerprint, a smudge of dirt that clings to the paper even decades later. By the end of 1935, the dream is gone. The great plow-up has ended not in bounty, but in burial. The wheat fields that once glowed gold under the sun are now dunes of dust. The trains that once carried profit now carry families fleeing west. The cowboys are forgotten, the barons disgraced, the land exhausted. And above it all, the wind keeps singing, low, endless, and patient. The sky is about to darken beyond imagination. The storms will not stop at the plains. They will cross states, rivers, and time itself, carrying the dust of arrogance to the very heart of power. The camera opens on April 14, 1935, a Sunday afternoon in the Oklahoma Panhandle. Church bells ring over empty streets. Families rest, windows open to a warm spring breeze that feels for once gentle. The sky is clear. The air smells of sun-baked dust and distant grass. For a few short hours, the plains seem calm again, as if the worst has passed. And then, without warning, the light begins to change. To the northwest, a thin, dark line rises against the horizon. At first mistaken for rain, a boy in Boise City points and shouts, "A storm's coming." But it's not rain, it's soil, miles high, rolling like an ocean in slow motion. The horizon climbs, black and boiling, swallowing the sun. By the time the first gust hits, the temperature drops 20 degrees. Chickens fly into fences. Horses scream. The air goes solid with grit. In less than a minute, daylight disappears. The storm travels at 60 miles an hour. It carries an estimated 300 million tons of topsoil, the bones of a continent. Men will remember this day forever. They'll call it Black Sunday. Inside their homes, families scramble for safety. Mothers soak bed sheets and hang them over windows. Fathers seal cracks with old newspapers and flour paste. The sound outside isn't thunder, it's the earth grinding against itself. In Dalhart, the Blake family huddles in their kitchen, lantern light trembling. Will Blake presses a damp rag over his daughter's mouth as dust seeps through the walls, through the keyholes, through the very air. The baby coughs, his wife weeps. The storm rages for hours. When it finally passes, silence falls like snow. The town is buried, drifts of dirt covering fences, cars, and doorsteps. The world looks like a photograph printed in sepia, every color erased. That was only one storm. Hundreds followed. Between 1934 and 1938, more than 350 major dust storms strike the Great Plains. They form without warning, rising from the bare earth like living things. Some so vast they reach the Rockies, others so wide they blot out states. The people give them names: black rollers, dusters, black blizzards. In Kansas, farmers crawl to their barns on hands and knees to avoid suffocating. In Texas, entire herds of cattle die standing, lungs filled with soil. The land has become a sea in reverse, the waves made of dust, the depths made of sky. The railroad tracks, once the veins of empire, lie half-buried. Trains run slower, wrapped in darkness even at noon. Conductors guide locomotives by instinct, feeling for the rails beneath the drifts. Some engines derail in silence, disappearing under waves of dirt where the prairie once bloomed. The Union Pacific, proudest line in the West, reports dozens of trains stranded. The telegraphs go dead. Water towers empty. The empire of steel, the pride of the railroad kings, is gasping for breath. In the East, financiers call it an operational disruption. Out here, it's the end of the world. The storms do not stay where they began. They travel east, mile by mile, state by state, crossing the Mississippi, darkening the skies over St. Louis and Chicago. Newspapers print photographs of the dust clouds reaching Washington, D.C., blotting out the Capitol dome. On May 11, 1934, a storm from the plains drops its burden on the White House lawn. Scientists collect samples and confirm it. Kansas soil, carried 2,000 miles by wind. A congressman from Oklahoma holds a jar of dust aloft during a hearing and says, "This is what's left of my district." The nation finally listens. Hugh Bennett, the soil scientist whose warnings went ignored for years, stands before the U.S. Senate Committee on Agriculture as another storm rolls toward Washington. When the sky darkens and the room grows dim, he points to the window and says, "Gentlemen, that's Oklahoma coming through the air." For once, silence fills the room, not from awe but from understanding. The land is speaking, and the voice is thunder made of dust. By 1936, the storms have names, and people track them like hurricanes. Schools close, hospitals fill with victims of dust pneumonia, children's chests rattle as they breathe, cows miscarry in the fields, whole towns disappear from maps. The railroad barons who once ruled these plains quietly sell their shares and retire to the coast. Their offices still hum with telephones and ledgers, but their empire is dead. The rails that once promised dominion now lie choked under the weight of their own creation. The cowboys they laughed at, the men who lived with the rhythm of the land, are gone. The settlers they lured west are broken. The dust spares no one. A survivor in Kansas writes, "We used to pray for rain, now we pray for the wind to stop." But even prayers have grit in them. At night, when the storms roll, people can hear the rails hum, a faint metallic wail under the wind. Some say it's just vibration, others say it's the ghosts of the trains howling through the dark, mourning the world they helped destroy. The sky turns black again and again until no one remembers what blue looks like. Children draw the sun from memory. Men stop planting. Women stop sweeping. Every home smells like soil and despair. But under all that ruin, something quiet is stirring. Not in the land yet, but in the people. A hard, slow realization. The earth can't be owned, only honored. The year is 1936, and the sound that once defined progress, the whistle of the train, has grown thin and uncertain. Where locomotives once thundered through the heartland, they now crawl through silence. The rails tremble under drifts of dirt. Telegraph poles lean like broken ribs. In towns such as Dalhart, Guymon, and Garden City, the stations still stand, but their clocks no longer keep good time. The dust has jammed the gears. The empire that laughed at the cowboys is coughing itself to death. In New York, the boardrooms of the great rail companies echo with tension. The Santa Fe, the Union Pacific, the Southern Pacific, all report losses. Freight volumes collapse, grain shipments vanish. The land itself has stopped producing, and the tracks that once paid dividends now rust in silence. Jay Gould is long dead. Huntington and Stanford too. But their legacy, their belief that men could master a continent by steel alone, lies exposed, buried beneath the dust their trains helped summon. The new generation of executives sends out memoranda. Service interruptions due to wind damage. Ongoing track clearance operations. The language is dry, bureaucratic. But out on the plains, wind damage means entire rail lines swallowed by earth. In Amarillo, a section crew works through a storm to clear the tracks. The foreman ties a scarf over his mouth, eyes stinging. He swings a shovel, digging out the rail, but the wind fills the trench before he can move to the next tie. He turns to his men and shouts, "We're digging the ocean with spoons." The company pays him by the mile. The wind pays no one. That night, the crew sleeps in the caboose, buried halfway in dust. When they wake, their shovels are gone, swallowed by the same earth they were trying to move. The trains that do make it through carry fewer passengers each week. Families crowd the cars with everything they own. Furniture tied with rope, chickens in crates, a Bible on the seat beside them. They are Okies, Texans, Kansans, the refugees of the empire. Ironically, the very rails that carried the Baron's fortune now carry their victims westward. The engines that once brought progress now pull exile. A brakeman on the Santa Fe line remembers it this way. We used to haul wheat east, polished cars, dining service. Now it's just folks running from dust. You can taste the ruin in the air. Each whistle that once sang of triumph now sounds like apology. In California, the refugees pour into towns already trembling under the weight of the depression. The papers call them migrants. The locals call them Okies. But they're not looking for charity, just for soil that still holds together. They follow the tracks, the last traces of the Baron's dream. And when they arrive, they find signs that read "No jobs, keep moving." The iron road that once promised destiny has become a trail of shame. Back east, the magnates' mansions still glitter, but their power is hollow. The Interstate Commerce Commission tightens regulations, breaking up monopolies and capping rates. The government that once bowed to them now reins them in. Newspapers that once praised their vision now print photographs of starving farmers and call it the price of progress. The laughter has stopped. In private clubs along Wall Street, old executives gather in quiet corners, nursing brandy and memory. One of them, a retired vice president of the Union Pacific, is heard to say, "We built the roads to save men from the horse. Now they're walking them again." No one answers. There's nothing left to say. Across the plains, the last survivors of the open range watch the empire's ruins with cold satisfaction. The old cowhands, gray now, stooped and quiet, understand what the barons never did, that the land is not conquered, only borrowed. One former rancher near Dodge City puts it plain. The railroad men thought they beat the prairie, but the prairie don't play by man's rules, it just waits. And wait it did, until the dust buried everything that forgot to listen. By late 1937, more than half the rail lines across the Great Plains are operating at a loss. Hundreds of miles of track are abandoned, swallowed by dunes, or left to rust. Stations that once saw a dozen trains a day now see none. The silence between whistle blows stretches for hours, then days. The railroad kings had gambled the soul of the continent on the idea that progress could be forced, measured, sold. Now the land has collected its due. Their empire lies beneath the same soil they once crossed with arrogance. And yet, beneath the wreckage, a faint stir of resilience begins to rise. The people are learning. Scientists, farmers, and reformers start to whisper of new ways to heal the earth. A partnership, not a conquest. But before renewal comes understanding, and the pain that brings it. The wind still blows through the empty stations, rattling loose tin signs. The rails gleam faintly under the dust, like bones in shallow grave. The kings are gone. The land remains. The soil has spoken, the empire has fallen, but the people still have to survive it. Now begins the long migration westward, along the same rails that once promised salvation. The year is 1937, and the plains are emptying. The horizon, once filled with windmills and wheat, now moves with caravans of trucks, wagons, and Fords piled high with what's left of a lifetime. Mattresses tied with rope, chickens in crates, children clutching dolls whose faces are gray with dust. The people of the Dust Bowl are leaving, not because they want to, because the land has driven them out. The camera follows one road west, US Route 66, the Mother Road. It hums with migration. Families from Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas, and Colorado inch forward toward the promise of California, chasing rumor and rain. It's a soundless procession at first, a crawl of desperation, but soon it becomes the heartbeat of a new American exodus, 400,000 souls crossing a continent in search of something solid to stand on. Their faces are sunburned and hollow. Their eyes carry the same dull color as the sky behind them, a kind of gray that never leaves. For every family that drives, two more take the train. The Santa Fe, the Rock Island, the Southern Pacific. The same companies that once boasted of opening the West now sell one-way tickets out of it. Boxcars fill with men, women, and children sitting atop their belongings. A farmer from Boise City sells his last mule to pay for a ticket to Bakersfield. He carries a jar of dirt from his farm, the color of coffee grounds, to remember what he lost. A conductor walking the aisle looks down at the jar and says quietly, "You might have done better to leave that behind." The farmer replies, "I did, it just won't let me go." The trains roll west through the night. Their headlights pierce the haze as the engines cross the dry heart of America. Past towns half buried, past windmills that no longer turn. The passengers cough, sleep, pray. When dawn comes, the windows are caked with dust. The children draw on them with their fingers. Crooked sons, stick horses, memories of home. At every stop, more climb aboard. The stations reek of sweat, diesel, and loss. Railroad porters sweep the dust off benches, knowing it will settle again within the hour. Even the machines seem tired. In California, the first wave of migrants arrives, gaunt, ragged, hopeful. But the golden fields they imagined are already crowded. Orchards and vineyards need pickers, but not this many. They find signs nailed to fence posts. No jobs for Okies. Keep moving. The state that once begged for settlers now turns them away. The same railroads that carried them here now charge for the privilege of leaving. A woman named Martha Calloway, widowed by pneumonia, keeps a small notebook during her journey. Her first entry reads, "We left the dust to breathe again, but the air here feels no kinder." Still, they work. They pick fruit, bale hay, dig ditches. They sleep in tents made of flour sacks and tar paper. Children play in irrigation ditches, their laughter thin but defiant. Reporters begin to take notice. John Steinbeck writes about them. Dorothea Lange photographs them, faces lined by wind and sun, eyes that seem to hold all the years of labor that came before. One picture in particular, a woman with worry carved into her brow, 2 children leaning on her shoulders, becomes the face of the Dust Bowl. America can no longer look away. Back east, the railroad executives study their ledgers in disbelief. The freight lines that once moved fortunes now carry refugees. Passenger cars fill with what's left of the working class they once courted as customers. The Santa Fe Railway, once a symbol of luxury and progress, now runs refugee specials, bare coaches, windows sealed to keep out the dust. On some nights, passengers sleep on the station floors, waiting for trains that never arrive. The companies that conquered the land now serve its victims. A strange symmetry, a quiet kind of justice. In the Central Valley, camps spring up by irrigation ditches and riverbanks. Thousands of tents and lean-tos, cities of canvas and desperation. Government inspectors call them temporary settlements, but many last for years. Children go barefoot in the mud. Women cook beans over fires built in oil cans. The men rise before dawn to wait by the road for trucks that may or may not stop. Some wear hats made from old feed sacks. Others carry the last tokens of their lost homes. A cracked branding iron, a bit of barbed wire, a rusted horseshoe. They still talk about rain, as if saying the word might summon it. One evening, a westbound train passes by a camp near Tulare. The sun sets behind it, painting the boxcars blood red. A boy stands beside the track, waving. Inside the caboose, a railroad worker raises his hand in return, a small gesture between 2 Americas that once shared the same dream. The whistle fades. The boy watches until the train vanishes, leaving only the echo of its wheels. He turns to his father and says, "When we get home, I'm going to build one of those." His father looks out across the dust and says softly, "Son, this is home now." The exodus continues, relentless, necessary, biblical. The land behind them has turned to ghost country. The land ahead is crowded with hope that has nowhere to land. Through it all, the rails endure, crossing the continent like scars. The iron roads outlast their kings, their builders, and even their passengers, but not their sins. The people have fled, the kings have fallen, and the land lies buried. But out of ruin comes reckoning, and out of reckoning, the first steps toward redemption. By 1938, the wind has become a constant presence, an animal that never sleeps. It moans through telephone wires, creeps under doorframes, and carries with it the bitter smell of ruin. The Great Plains are no longer a place of men. They are a battlefield between the earth and the sky. Every sunrise begins the same, a thin gray light, a brief calm, and then the wind returns, hissing across the dead fields. Fence posts lean like gravestones. Windmills stand still, their bearings clogged with dirt. The towns that remain, Stratford, Hooker, Boise City, Dalhart, feel hollow, like shells left behind by something that moved on. The land is reclaiming what it lost, slowly, methodically, without mercy. The camera pans across a once proud farm. The roof has caved in under the weight of dust. The barn door swings open and shut without sound. Inside, a tractor sits half buried, its tires flattened, its seat filled with sand. A child's toy, a small tin train, lies rusting on the steps. This is the vengeance of the land, not in violence, but in silence. No fire, no flood, just the slow burial of everything that forgot to listen. When the first great storm hit Washington, D.C., it was easy to treat as spectacle, a curiosity from the West. But by the spring of 1938, no one laughs. Dust now falls on New York, settles on ships in the Atlantic, mixes with rain in Boston. The sky above America carries the continent's conscience. Newspapers print editorials titled "The Plains Are Bleeding." The radio announcers read statistics like eulogies. 100 million acres ruined, 2.5 million people displaced, over 1 billion tons of topsoil lost. For the first time, the nation begins to understand that progress has a cost, and the bill always comes due. In Dalhart, Will Blake stands outside what's left of his barn. He's thinner now, older than his years. The wheat is gone, the well has gone salty, and the wind never stops. His son, 12 years old, asks him, "Why's the land mad at us?" Will doesn't answer. He looks out over the drifting soil and says quietly, "Because we forgot its name." Meanwhile, in Washington, a new kind of general takes the field. Hugh Hammond Bennett, the same soil scientist who once warned of disaster. Appointed head of the Soil Conservation Service, he rallies an army not of soldiers, but of farmers, engineers, and teachers. Their mission to make peace with the land before it dies completely. Bennett's words echo across the plains. The soil is the great connector of lives. Destroy it and we destroy ourselves. It's not poetry, it's survival. The SCS sends teams into the heart of the Dust Bowl. They plant windbreaks of trees stretching hundreds of miles. The Shelter Belt Project. They teach crop rotation, contour plowing, and strip farming. They show farmers how to hold the land again, how to read it like scripture instead of ledger. Slowly, some listen. Slowly, the land responds. But the work is brutal. Every inch of recovery feels borrowed. In Oklahoma, men plant tree after tree in soil so dry it turns to powder between their fingers. They haul water by hand, carry seed in buckets, and pray for clouds that might not come. Yet something begins to shift, not just in the earth but in the people. Photographers capture it. One picture shows a farmer kneeling, pressing a handful of soil between his palms. The dirt still looks dead, but his face is calm, as if he's talking to it, asking permission to start over. Another shows a line of boys planting saplings in a straight line across the horizon, each small tree a promise that the land will live long enough for them to grow old. The images spread across the country, carried by newspapers and government pamphlets. The message is clear. The land can forgive, but only if man humbles himself first. Still, the damage is not just physical, it's spiritual. Entire generations lose faith in the idea of progress. Men who once swore by the machine now walk away from it. Churches preach sermons on pride and punishment. Politicians talk about stewardship instead of expansion. The railroad kings, their names carved into marble, fade into irrelevance. Their monuments gather dust, literal and symbolic. No one remembers their speeches, only the wreckage they left behind. One former railroad accountant interviewed years later said, "We thought we could lay down rails across the world and make it obey. But the world laid its own rails under us, and they ran straight into the ground." By 1939, the winds begin to slow. A few good rains fall across Kansas and Oklahoma. The ground tentative starts to hold. The sky lightens. Children run outside in the drizzle laughing, real laughter, not the nervous kind. They tilt their faces to the rain, tasting it as if it's the first water ever made. And in a way it is, the first mercy after years of judgment. The land's revenge is complete, but so is its lesson. The people will rebuild, but not as conquerors this time, as caretakers. The storms are easing, but the reckoning is not over. Now comes the hardest part, learning how to rebuild a nation that thought it could never fall. The camera opens on the plains in 1939. The same ground that once howled with dust, now lying still beneath a soft rain. Drops patter against rusted fence wire, beat along the edges of barbed steel, and roll down into soil that for the first time in years begins to drink. Men step outside their doorways and look upward, hats in hand, faces tilted to the clouds. No one cheers. They just stand there, quiet, letting the rain do what sermons and machines could not, remind them that the land is alive. After nearly a decade of ruin, the people begin to rebuild, not with pride this time, but with care. Government trucks arrive carrying seedlings, soil maps, and men in khaki shirts with the emblem of the Soil Conservation Service stitched to their sleeves. These aren't salesmen, they're teachers. They talk of contour plowing, cover crops, and the rhythm of the land. The old-timers are skeptical. One farmer tells the agent, "You can't teach a mule new tricks." The agent replies, "Maybe not, but the mule learns when he's hungry." And hunger has been the plains teacher for too long. The Shelter Belt Project, one of the largest environmental efforts in American history, plants over 200 million trees from Texas to the Canadian border. Cottonwoods, elms, and red cedars march across the horizon in straight green lines. Living fences meant to hold the wind at bay. Children in overalls plant saplings with their fathers, tamping the soil down around each fragile stem. "This one's yours," a father says to his boy. "Someday it'll be taller than both of us." The boy nods, not quite believing it, but the tree will outlive them both. For the first time, progress doesn't mean expansion. It means endurance. Farmers relearn old truths their grandfathers knew. Rotate crops, rest the soil. Let the grass heal what man has wounded. The New Deal programs, the CCC, the WPA, and the SCS pour men and resources into the plains. They rebuild wells, dig terraces, and repair what greed had torn apart. Hugh Bennett, the man who once stood before Congress with the storm at his back, tours the region again. Where he once found ruin, he now finds resilience. At a meeting in Amarillo, he stands before a crowd of farmers and says, "You cannot own the land. You can only work for it, like a hired hand. And if you do the job right, it lets you stay." The crowd nods. They've lived the proof. The railroads too changed their tune. Gone are the grand speeches of conquest. Now freight cars haul seedlings, fencing, and equipment for the conservation projects. Engineers help design irrigation systems, learning that steel and soil must cooperate, not compete. The Santa Fe and Union Pacific run soil specials, trains converted into traveling classrooms. Inside, agricultural scientists demonstrate erosion control and crop rotation, stopping at each town to teach men how to rebuild what the rails once helped destroy. It's the same iron road, but a humbler purpose. The plains begin to recover. The rain comes a little more often, the grass returns in patches, and the wind carries less dust. Coyotes reappear, meadowlarks sing again. The horizon once stripped bare grows soft with green. But the memory of loss never leaves. Old farmers still keep jars of dust on their shelves, reminders of what happens when man mistakes ownership for stewardship. At church picnics and grain co-ops, they tell their children the same lesson in different words. You can't fight the land, you have to listen to it. The children roll their eyes, the way children do. But someday they'll remember. In the town of Dalhart, the Blakes rebuild their farmhouse. Will, gray-haired now, stands beside his son as they plant a new crop, not wheat, but sorghum, tough enough to hold in dry years. He turns the soil by hand and finds worms again, small, pale, and alive. His wife Martha watches from the porch and says, "It's coming back." Will nods, "So are we." Behind him, the prairie glows under the evening light, no longer conquered, but forgiving. Across America, the Dust Bowl becomes a story of survival, not defeat. The nation learns to measure progress not by the miles of track laid, but by the acres of soil restored. Documentaries, newsreels, and photographs carry the story to the cities. People begin to understand that the frontier was never truly closed, it just changed form. The new frontier is not land to take, but land to keep. The railroad kings are gone, their fortunes scattered, their statues collecting the very dust they ignored. In their place stands a generation of quiet men and women who've earned their humility. By 1941, as the world edges toward another war, the plains are steady again, still dry, still hard, but breathing. The trees of the shelter belt sway in the wind that once destroyed everything. The rails hum with trains carrying food once more, not refugees. And when the whistle blows, it doesn't sound like pride anymore. It sounds like penance. The camera pans wide across the fields, the small towns, the slow rebirth of the heartland. The sun sets behind windbreaks of green, glinting off rails that stretch to the horizon. The land is quiet again, not empty, but at peace. The storms have passed, and the land is healing. Yet every silence carries a memory, and every blade of grass holds a warning. The camera opens at dawn. The wind is still. The sky above the plains burns pale gold, stretching unbroken in every direction. A single freight train crawls along a distant ridge, its whistle soft, respectful, not the triumphant scream of empire, but a tired breath in a world finally quiet enough to hear it. The earth below glows with life again. Grass ripples where dust once rolled. Saplings from the old shelter belt now stand tall enough to cast long shadows, their roots deep and sure. Between them, the soil lies dark and rich, scarred, but living. And in that stillness, America remembers. In the town of Dalhart, the Blake family's farm endures. The roof is sound, the well runs clear, and the fields hum with summer insects. Will Blake, older now, walks the fence line at sunrise, his hat low and his hands rough. He passes the edge of his sorghum field and kneels to touch the earth, still damp from last week's rain. "It's held," he murmurs, "finally held." He looks down the dirt road that once led nowhere and watches the train pass in the distance, a slow ribbon of steel against the sky. Its cars carry timber and grain again. Not luxury, not wealth, just work, honest work. Across the plains, the scars of the Dust Bowl fade into legend. Abandoned towns are swallowed by grass. Rusted tractors lie half-buried, their metal bones sinking back into the soil. Children play on them, unaware of the stories their parents still whisper when the wind rises. Those who stayed live differently now. They plant cover crops, they rest their fields, they talk about soil the way their grandfathers talked about cattle, with reverence, not possession. The Soil Conservation Service becomes a permanent part of the nation's vocabulary. The Dust Bowl becomes a warning taught in schools, a reminder of what pride can cost. The frontier that once defined America didn't end when the trains arrived. It ended when the land stopped forgiving. In Washington, a small plaque hangs in the hallway of the Department of Agriculture. It reads simply, "To the people who stayed and the land that endured." It's not grand, but then the truth rarely is. 1,000 miles west, the last remnants of the old railroad kings rest in graveyards shaded by iron gates. Their empires have been divided, merged, forgotten. The steel that once crossed the continent now rusts quietly beside the tracks, overtaken by weeds. No one speaks their names with reverence anymore, only curiosity. Because the men who thought they conquered the frontier never realized that the frontier was the land itself, and it could not be bought, only borrowed. When the wind rises now, it carries the smell of sage and rain again. It whistles softly through the fence wire, humming like the echo of a cowboy's old trail song. The land seems to breathe in rhythm with the sky. And if you listen closely, you can almost hear the memory of two Americas meeting, the one that believed in conquest and the one that learned respect. At sunset, Will Blake sits on his porch beside his wife. The sky burns orange over the sorghum fields. Their grandchildren play in the yard, their laughter mingling with the sound of the evening train far off to the north. Martha leans against him and says, "You think the land remembers?" Will nods. The land never forgets. It just waits to see if we've learned. The train whistle sounds again, one long, low note fading into the wind. The camera pulls back wide, endless. Rails cutting through grass, windmills turning slow, fields rising and falling with the breeze like the breathing of something ancient and patient. The narrator's voice returns one last time. The railroad kings laughed at the cowboys. They believed steel was stronger than soil, that progress could outrun consequence. But the land had its own sense of time, and when the laughter died, the earth took back everything it was owed. They built their empire loud. The land answered in silence. And that silence remains, steady as the wind, older than pride, whispering the same truth to anyone who will listen. They didn't build it perfect, but they built it honest. If this story moved you, help us keep these forgotten chapters of America alive. Subscribe, and if you felt the wind and the dust in this one, leave a like.